Hello, everybody. It is Professor Parish, and we're on Module 15, and we've got quite a lot to talk about in this video, so I am just going to go right ahead and talk about what we're doing this week. So before I scroll down to Module 15, I do want to note that this MLA Sources and Citations presentation, we're going to go over it briefly. I've gone over it in a previous lecture video, but in the last discussion forum, some of you were talking about questions that I was like, well, the answer's right here in this presentation. So we're going to go back over it just to make sure everybody knows where that information is at. But let's go down to Module 15 first. And in our guide, we only have 2 assignments this week. You are still working on your final paper, obviously, but there's just 2 assignments this week. There's no readings. There is an extra credit assignment and 1 assignment for Thanksgiving week. So really just 1 assignment due for a grade, and then the other assignment is totally extra credit, but the MLA citation presentation is going to help you with that extra credit assignment. So we'll come back to this presentation here in a minute, but I want to go over what is due first of all this week, and that is Module 7. So Module 7, or Reading Response 7, sorry. Reading Response 7 is a little bit different than the other reading responses we've been doing. It is not based on your textbook. So you have some questions that you're going to answer. You're going to have an introduction and conclusion, obviously, and then you're going to answer these 3 questions. So it's kind of in lieu of a discussion forum for this week. But the first question is, which genre of writing have you enjoyed the most in class? Was it short story, poetry, or genre, or drama? Explain your answer. The second question is, were there any genres you were nervous encountering in this course? And has your opinion changed since then? So if you were nervous going into poetry, how did you feel after we did poetry? And you just explain your answer. And then the third question is, of the genres that are your favorites, choose an example from our textbook. So you will use your textbook for this. I lied. Choose an example from our textbook and explain what makes it a good example of that genre. So if you chose short story, you could use Hemingway's Hills Like White Elephants, and you could explain why it is a good example of a short story. And so this can be, the text that you choose can be one that you've previously chosen for another reading response. So you can double dip there. If you had a play that we recently did for a previous reading response, and you want to talk about it again, you can do that in this assignment. But that is reading response number 7. So we don't have a discussion forum this week. So instead, you have that reading response, and then we have the extra credit annotated bibliography, which is this assignment here. So before completing the assignment, we're going to look at this bibliography presentation. And then for extra credit, you're going to cite at least 4 sources that could be used for your final paper in MLA format. And under each cited source, you're going to have an annotation. And any extra credit ones you do will give you even more extra credit. So let's look at that bibliography presentation. If you've never done an annotated bibliography before, they're not hard. I did them in grad school, and this is going to be a lot easier than the grad school ones. Let's just say that. So the idea is that an annotation is when you summarize info from a source. So the purpose of the annotation is kind of like if you've ever looked up a journal article and you saw something called an abstract, that is an annotation. It just tells you what the source is about, how you're going to use that source, and how it's relevant. That's it. It's pretty straightforward. So typically, when you start an annotation, you have your source cited in MLA format. You skip a space, and then you write a small paragraph about the source where you summarize its content, its usefulness, and how it's credible. So for example, this is an example annotation. Here's my citation. I've got my author's last name, comma, first name. I've got the article title in quotation marks. I have the URL, the basic one, in italics. I have the name of the publisher. I have the date it was published, and I have the link. That's all I need. That's my citation right there. Now, someone asked if you had to use a hanging indent. You should, but I'm not going to count off on this assignment for it because you have an annotation under it. If you want to practice and do a hanging indent, absolutely, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But this is my annotation. So I say Smith's article discusses several example articles that can be used for academic essays as sources. So that sentence summarizes what the article is about. Then I say the article is from a known credible website and is founded by this journal, the leading source of example articles. So this sentence establishes why it's credible. And then I say, I plan to use this site as a main source of articles to discuss in my essay. That's how I'm going to use it. Now, I was being extremely generic in this annotation, but I just used 3 sentences to answer those 3 questions. That's all you need. It can be pretty basic. So basically, your annotated bibliography is a collection of annotations for a single paper. It's like a works cited page in that you have your sources cited in MLA, but the annotations are also there. And you list your works cited sources in alphabetical order by the author's last name, or if there is no author, by the title of the article. So for your assignment, for extra credit, you're going to cite 4 sources that you're either using or could use in your final paper in MLA format and include an annotation below each citation. The annotation should have a summary of what the source is about, how you plan to use the source in your paper, and what makes the source usable or credible for your essay. That's all you need. So you make sure to put your annotations in alphabetical order. And like the assignment says, if you have any extra beyond 4, I'll give you even more extra credit. So this is a huge extra credit opportunity. If you need it, definitely take advantage of it. It's going to be a very, very easy assignment that shouldn't take you too long, especially if you already are working on sources for your paper, right? So it should be pretty easy, but it's due by Sunday if you want extra credit. Okay. So this is the MLA sources and citation presentation. This is the one that's on our homepage. I'm not going to read these slides word for word, but I want to get to the point where I think y'all may find this useful. So the first couple slides talk to you about bias with sources and how you can use biased examples in your papers. This 5th slide talks about site credibility. So I don't consider Wikipedia's or WikiHow's to be credible sources. I just don't, because they're easily editable. People can edit them very easily. And the research is not always accurate. So if you're planning to use a Wikipedia source, don't. Now, if you're like, I know some people that really like going to Wikipedia as a starting point. If you go to Wikipedia, scroll down to the bottom of the page and you'll find the sources that Wikipedia is citing and go to those for your paper. Don't use Wikipedia, okay? Now, credibility, you can tell credibility in a website usually by the domain name. So if it's a .com or a .net, .com means commercial. That means, and .net means a network. That means anybody can buy a .com URL. I could make professorparish.com and just spout off all this nonsense and say that it's true when it's not, right? So anybody can buy a .com site and use it. However, they're the cheapest sites, so a lot of times you have to be careful, because even though I say the .coms aren't the most credible, a lot of hospitals use .coms, a lot of companies use .coms because they're accessible. So you just kind of have to proceed with caution when you use .com sites as examples. .orgs are organizations. There can still be some less than credible sites. Like I did see, like it was like bigfootisreal.org. It's like, okay. But typically an organization has to be purchased and is more expensive than a .com domain. So again, proceed with caution. Now, if you cite a .edu or a .gov source, I will consider those credible without a doubt, because they're a school site and a government site. They are pretty much required to be objective. So you can use those sites and I wouldn't question you. So when you're determining credibility, does your site have an author? Unless it's a medical, educational, or a corporate website, it should have an author listed. And if it doesn't, you might not use it as a source, okay? Are sites advertising on them? Just be careful. Do they look professional? Does the information show bias or objectivity? You know, just use your best judgment. And then the next couple of slides talk about like what type of sources, like you should probably find sources within 5 years that have been published, etc. And this gives a little bit about MLA. So as far as MLA goes, there's 2 parts to MLA citation, your works cited page and the in-text citations. A lot of people think in-text citations are hard. They're really not. You just got to know what to put down. So for example, an in-text citation is just when you quote a source or you reference it in a paragraph, at the end of that reference, you need something in parentheses. Now, in this case, I talked about an article that was from a website, so I put the website URL, and that's my in-text citation. So scrolling down, there are some basic types. You either have print or web sources for in-text citations. If it's a print source, you really have two options. Either you do the author's last name and the page number, if it's a print source, or if your source does not have an author, then you do the title and the page number. That's pretty much it. If it's digital, you don't have page numbers, so you either do the author's last name, or if there's no author, you put the website URL. That's it. You got four options. You're either going to use the author's name with or without page numbers, or you're going to use the title of the book if it's a print source, or you're going to use the web URL if it's a website. That's it. That's all you do for in-text citations. They're actually pretty easy. So then you have your works cited page. Now, this was some of you noted that you didn't know whether you should use italics or quotation marks for titles. Slide 17, here you go. This is your answer. I always think that if it is a small text, like a chapter of a book, a short story, an episode of a TV show, a poem, a news article, a song title, those are smaller texts, so you put them in quotation marks. But the bigger text you put in italics. So books, novels, TV shows, music albums, entire websites, entire journals. The bigger the text, the more you put it in italics. Okay, so that slide should help give you an idea of what to put where when you're citing. Now, MLA is one of those things. Citation is something that you just get better at it over time, and it just takes practice. I've done so many citations at this point that I can almost do it in my sleep, but I've been doing it for years. Most of you will only do it for a couple years, then you'll never cite anything ever again, which is fine. But your basic formula for a citation is always your author's last name, a comma, their first name, the title of the work, the publisher, and the date. That's the basic formula, and you'll just tweak it a little bit depending on the type of source that you're citing. So for example, this slide here tells you how to cite a book. You do author last name, comma, first name. The book title's in italics because it's a big book. Your publisher and year of publication. That's it. That's all you need. And I've got a little example down here in MLA. Web pages, it's a little bit different. You still have your author last name, comma, first name. The title of the web page is in quotation marks. Your web URL is in italics. Then you have the web publisher, the date published, and the link. So for example, I have Murphy, comma, Tanya. Tanya Murphy's my author. I have immigration reform on the forefront is the title of my article. I got it from nytimes.com. So I'll put nytimes in italics. Now here's where a lot of students get confused because MLA wants you to put the URL and the publisher. The thing is, usually those two things are the same because it's branding. A website wants to have the same brand as its publisher. So I have NY Times here, like nytimes.com. The publisher of NY Times is the New York Times Online. So it's going to look pretty similar. Then I have my date published, and then I have the link. That's all I need. Make sure on the date that you do the day first, and then the month, and then the year. And then make sure you put the full link to the site only at the end of the citation. The main part of the URL is what goes up here by the title, not the full link. Okay. And then journal articles are probably the hardest to cite because they have the most information, but still, Jane Doe, last name, comma, first name. Title of the article is Pavlov's Theory. Then you have the journal title in italics, the American Psychological Journal. Then you have the volume 14, the issue 5, 2014 is the date, and then the pages. It's all you need. Okay? And if you have any other questions, Purdue OWL's website has a link to talk about MLA and APA. So if you have questions, you can always reference back to that. Or if you have any questions, you can always email me. That works too. But anyway, those are the assignments for this week. Just the reading response. And then if you want to do the extra credit annotated bibliography, you can. That's totally up to you. But as always, if you have any questions, please let me know. But otherwise, I hope you all have a wonderful week. Have a happy Thanksgiving. Please stay safe, take care, and I'll talk to y'all again real soon with Module 16. Bye!